Hello and welcome to Telesur. I'm Carla Gonzalez. This is Interviews from Quito, the program where we explore some of the biggest challenges facing this country and the region. In today's program, we take a look at how art is evolving in Ecuador and how the film industry is adapting to a changing world, where theater survives despite us living in a world filled with platforms like Netflix that have changed the way we see films. To talk about this, we have Ecuadorian film director Sebastian Cordero. But first, let's take a look at this video.
Sebastian Cordero is hoping to deliver a one-of-a-kind theater experience to audiences in Quito. The play will take place in the corridors, staircases, patios and rooms of a colonial mansion in Ecuador's capital city. The director adapted one of his most successful feature films into a theater play. Sebastian says Rabia is his only film project in which he tells a love story. It is actually a narrative about an impossible kind of love. It's the story of two people who want to be together, and although they try to, they cannot. It is also about family, life cycles, and of course it has its share of villains. All these elements came together in a production of 1 hour and 40 minutes. Rabia will run until February the 23rd at the Muñoz Mariño Museum House, located in the traditional San Marcos neighborhood. The Cultural House in Quito's historic center is a fitting venue for Sebastian's project. The setup allows audience members to be in close proximity to the actors, such as Lucho Moicay. He describes the location as a magical space where the narrative can be fully understood and appreciated.
The people walk through the house. That is how it works. It ain't an Italian theater nor traditional theater with chairs in front of the stage. It is the people who move through the story and are part of the dynamics of the play. We, the actors, are around the audience.
One of the main characters is José María, a sexist and jealous character who is at the same time portrayed as romantic. The character is played by Guayaquil actor Alejandro Fajardo.
My original idea was to keep the novel's essence, while at the same time distance the character in the novel from the movie. And this is what I like about theater. I can rethink and reinvent original ideas. I've tried to rethink many things about José María's character. And that's how we did it. We worked with Sebastian and tried to find a new side to José María.
Many well-known Ecuadorian actors are part of Cordero's latest project, such as Orlando Herrera, Carla Yepes, Itzel Cuevas and Diego Naranjo. And we can expect more from the talented filmmaker. He says he will keep working on other theater productions, and he also hopes to thrill more audiences with a second showing of Rabia.
So thank you, Sebastian, for being with us. Let's first have a look at the film industry in Ecuador. Is it changing due to advances in technology that we see every day?
Yes, I think there's definitely been some changes, some very interesting changes in the industry in Ecuador over this past decade or so, for several reasons. On one hand, you have more accessible technology. You can shoot high quality product with less resources than you used to be able to, and the other thing is there's been support from originally the Consejo Nacional de Cine, the Cinema Council, which now is the Institute of Cinema and Audiovisual, and that support I think has also been very helpful. However, at the same time, we're a bit behind in the region in terms of ways of producing and financing films. Several of our neighboring countries, like Colombia and Mexico, who have thriving film industries at this point, also have tax incentives and other ways of mixing public and private resources, which I think are essential for making films. In the end, you end up needing to knock a lot of doors in a lot of different places, and you need a system that would really help for different types of films.
And you've had a lot of success with your films abroad. How do you see the local artists, filmmakers?
I think there's a lot of diversity of voices, and I find that really great. In Ecuadorian cinema, I can't pinpoint one type or one genre that has been the strongest here. I think there's been very interesting films and a lot of young filmmakers who are trying to find their voice and their way of their style, their way of telling stories. And I think that's been really interesting. The documentary filmmaking, I think in particular, here in Ecuador has been doing really well. I mean, I think we have some very strong documentaries, both on the personal side, you know, the more personal, confessional documentaries, as well as documentaries that expose situations that I think are very important to talk about. And I think there's been really a growth in that side of the film movement for sure. And in fiction, I think there's some great new voices that I think are finding their audience gradually. The tricky thing right now is actually connecting our cinema to our public. I think there's been moments where we've had a great audience to our films. You know, in my case, with Ratones Rateros 20 years ago, and then Pescador more recently, the films you know, were very successful in terms of the number of people attending. These past few years, for some reason, the numbers have gone down dramatically, and I think it has to do with a mixture of people getting more accustomed to seeing more Ecuadorian films, so it's not such a novelty thing, and at the same time feeling that not all of them meet their expectations. You know, it's always a tricky balance. Also, it's harder, I think, to stay in a theater if the audience doesn't come, and you know, usually the theaters have been great in terms of opening their doors to us. But if the theater is not full, obviously they have to continue. So it's also a tricky balance in terms of finding an audience for our films.
And you have taken it even a step further. You've taken one of your most successful films and turning it into a play. How does that work, and where did the idea come from?
Well, it's interesting because it wasn't something that I had planned beforehand. I was always curious about theater as a film director. You know, it's a challenge to say I'm going to work with actors on a live experience. And I also wanted to explore a different type of theater. Although I'm a huge fan of theater, and I read a lot of theater, and I try to go a lot. I thought it would be really interesting to experiment with a format that would be more involving, you know, more immersive. So the idea is that the play Rabia is taken place inside a house, and inside this house the characters move in the different rooms and the different spaces, and the audience moves with them. And what's interesting is, on one hand, a change of perspective from scene to scene, but the other thing is you can reach an incredible intimacy next to the actors, because you can be in small spaces with a very little audience, you know, witnessing a very dramatic scene, and I think that becomes very powerful. So, I don't know, it's been a great experience. We already presented the play in Guayaquil. We did 9 weeks there earlier last year, in 2018, and now we just opened in Quito, in the center of Quito, in an old house in the Museo Muñoz Mariño, which is a wonderful space. And so far it's been great. The people have been responding really well. The first weekend was sold out, and hopefully, you know, the play will be on until the middle of February. Hopefully it'll remain this way.
And it's something unique that is happening in media and in theater here in Ecuador. What has been the response of the people attending, of the actors themselves? I
think it's been wonderful. People who have attended the play, they comment on how unique of an experience it is, of how it places them, the audience in the middle of the action, in the middle of what would be the stage normally. And people are really into it. I mean, there may be a little bit of a novelty element to it, but in the end, the play works as it's not just okay. It's a device that will try out just to get more people in. No, it's something that came organically from the story, from thinking of the best way to tell this story in a live format, and it's been working really well in terms of the response with people.
And it seems that for a director, that each of the plays that you present keeps changing with how people react. Maybe someone doesn't know and is scared of the actors being close to them, or the actors change how they react to different scenes depending on how people are reacting.
Yes, well, one of the great things about live theater is that the connection with the audience can be really felt during the play. And in this case, because the audience is so close to the actors, there really is a fascinating bond, I think, that happens. And I think the other thing for me is that because each performance is unique, and that's one of the things that I love about doing theater now, because each performance is unique, I can keep changing things and I can keep adjusting things, and I intend on continuing to do that until the very last show, because that's part of one of the temptations of theater, that you can continue adjusting, and that's something that's always tempting to do.
Indeed, indeed. So let's analyze how the idea of turning into a play can work for other movies. Do you feel that you can keep doing this in the future, or is this a one-time thing?
I don't think, I mean, right now, I haven't thought of adapting any other of my movies to another format. However, I want to play more with this format, with the idea of going into a place and having the audience experience things in an immersive way. So I definitely think later on I will try some more experiences like this with this format, but I don't think they will be from my movies. In this case, Rabia fits so perfectly because it takes place inside a house. The movie is claustrophobic in itself, so it made sense to adapt it to a live experience in one space. But my other movies are road movies, Pescador travels around the country, Ratas also travels, Quito, Guayaquil. I don't think there would be a point to try to adapt those.
True. And another fascinating thing about the play and the movie is that it touches upon an issue that is very present in Ecuador and the rest of Latin America as well, which is gender violence, violence against women. So unfortunately, as we opened the play, it became more and more relevant, because this week these two horrible cases here in Ecuador. But then, you look back and there are countless of cases of violence against women, and it's an incredible moment that finally people are starting to face it in a different way than in the past. But it's been also, a very scary moment, a very difficult moment, and I think. The play, although the themes of the play were there, in the movie 10 years ago and in the novel before that, that's unfortunate. That's unfortunate that these things don't change or haven't changed yet. So the play does take the theme of gender violence. The character of Rosa suffers all type of gender violence throughout the play, whether it's a mild harassment to an actual rape. It's a very strong ordeal that she has to suffer through during the play, and at the same time she keeps up her dignity, her pride, and there's something about how we constructed the play that where I wanted to touch upon these subjects, but then it's the audience who's watching this who, in the end, through the impact of these moments, draws a conclusion that is, well, pretty obvious, but it's unfortunate that all this violence is still present, and that's something that needs to change. And can we see a theater and film industry as a way to open up a discussion, a bigger discussion on these issues?
Absolutely. I mean, I think any of the arts, any way of communication that reaches an audience is a perfect forum to start discussing these things. Absolutely. I mean, there needs to be more consciousness about this issue, and it needs to be also dealt with responsibly. And one of the things that I think is great about cinema and about theater is that it allows you to show things in more complexity than sometimes just a small tweet or a small message or something, which is also important. But I think there needs to be all different types of communication about this issue.
Mm-hmm. And well, at the end, it's very important to also see the support that people get for arts and cultures, for plays, for movies that are produced here in Ecuador. How is that situation right now with festivals, with organizations?
Well, there is support. I mean, there's always been interest in what's happening in Ecuador from the different parts of the world and different festivals, but at the same time, I think the local support is good. I mean, there was a time where there was none. Now there is some support, and I think it is significant, but it does need to go further than that. And also at this moment, with the changes and the reforms on the communication law, there's also some unrest amongst the filmmakers, because basically right now, and this might already be changing by the time this is on air. But there's been debate between with the Asamblea, and the president just vetoed one of the changes that well, I'm sorry, he vetoed the proposal to continue incentivizing the production of publicity and commercials here, which has been very important in terms of forming crews, and forming an industry. And we don't know at this point whether that's going to continue or not, and that's something that a lot of the filmmakers we are very worried about. But once again, it's the ups and downs of politics, of how things are handling. There's back and forth. There's definitely been a great growth in the last few years. We want that to continue.
And how does it affect the filmmakers, the debate that has been going on about merging different institutions that have to deal with cinema and audiovisual?
I think it's tricky. I mean, I understand the logic of trying to merge the different institutions, but the thing is they're very specific to each other. And the film industry, you need people who really know how the film industry works, and they need experience in that, and I think they need to be specialized in that, and they need to be part of the film industry to be a part of the Film Institute. By merging that with theater or with other plastic arts or with anything else, I think the things get muddled. I think there's a lot more work that can be done through a very specific work geared towards that industry. With the Consejo Nacional de Cine, the Cinema Council that existed before, there was presence from the filmmakers in the actual directory of the council, and I think that made a difference. I think that needs to come back in a way. I know that the structure of an institute doesn't allow for that, but the presence and the opinion of the filmmakers, I think, is crucial for anything to develop and to happen accordingly to what our industry needs.
And let's look at the other side also, on the film industry, the filmmakers, the actors, the producers. What do they need still in Ecuador? We've come a long way, we've produced a lot of movies, documentaries, but there's something still needed. What do they need?
I think so. I mean, there's always things that can be improved. I think in terms of actors, of crews, of everyone in front of and behind the camera. Obviously, support and to continue the support to local films, to allow for a system that would allow to incorporate other types of films also to apply to funds, tax incentives, all those things would be useful. Also, of course, education, the access to education, which I think is always the basis to improve an industry, to improve an activity, whether it's having more courses and laboratories and things happening here, as well as taking filmmakers to different places of the world, to markets, to the festivals. All that help is always very welcome. But in the end, each process comes from an individual, from someone who begins with an idea, and that idea needs to grow. And in order to grow, it needs all the support and all the help it can get. But that initial seed and that desire to tell a story, that need to go forward with that, is something that also needs to be nurtured and incentivized.
And how do you see, which do you see are the challenges coming forward, maybe 5, 6, 7 years ahead for Ecuadorian filmmaking?
Well, the biggest challenge is that the industry is changing in terms of how we watch our movies. Now it's all streaming, internet, computers. You reserve going to the movie theater for the big spectacle, you know, and I think it's a mistake. An intimate movie in a big theater is incredibly powerful, but that's what the audience has dictated over the last few years, and it seems that things are going in that direction. So with the streaming and the internet, there's so much material, so much content that's available. I think much faster and at a much bigger volume than before, and it's very hard to enter that content. For instance, Netflix, which is probably the biggest provider right now for most of the people who are watching movies streaming legally, so far they don't have, as far as I know, any Ecuadorian film in their platform. And the reason is because the numbers of subscribers in Ecuador are very small compared to Colombia, to Mexico, to the rest of the Latin American continent, and so they are obviously geared by numbers. While at the same time they're trying to make high quality films, and the fact that Netflix is behind Roma by Alfonso Cuarón is fantastic. You know, it's actually reaching so many more people than that film would have reached under different circumstances. But at the same time, it's a moment where times are changing, and to actually enter that whole world is still puzzling, I think, to most of us, and it's something that over time we need to be able to adapt to what's coming up. At the same time, it's known that when you have an industry that is perhaps less developed or that has smaller numbers than other countries, it's easier to start making a change in a way and to adjust to a new reality. But it's still a reality that we're not so sure how will continue to go on.
And before we end, do you feel that these projects like Rabia being adapted to a play can change the way people see media and movies?
Well, I think so. I think for an audience, it's actually surprising to watch this theater experience, you know, and discover a new way of telling a story. And I think that triggers ideas with people, and I think it allows you to think differently. Nowadays, everything is done for the telephone and the internet and the social media, and that's changing also the way people look at the world, looking at something vertically rather than horizontally now, because the apps and the phone take us that way. It's fascinating to see how a single technological change might affect a whole way of a whole format in telling stories, you know. And I think in a way, in a much smaller way, but in a direct fashion, a play that uses different tools, different ways of telling a story, also I think makes people think and look at things differently.
Because they can also participate a bit more.
Yes.
They're kind of like ghosts inside a house, or rats inside a house that get to see what's happening inside without being seen by the rest.
Yes, absolutely. And it's fascinating, because when you're inside the play, you might have 20 people around you who are in the audience, and yet in your head they become invisible and you're only watching the actors. You know, they're there, but what's important is the actors and the action that's there. And that's something that's always an important reminder to have, that what's crucial is the story, is the characters, it's what's happening between them.
Indeed. We've been talking to Sebastian Cordero, Ecuadorian filmmaker, about how the local movie industry is adapting and is even gaining spaces in a rapidly changing cultural landscape. Thank you for watching. This is Interviews from Quito. I'm Carla Gonzalez. Until next time.